You'll feel confident in GT3, but when you switch to a hypercar, you suddenly lose control in corners where you never struggled with. Most GT3 drivers think hypercars are just harder. More speed, more aero, more to manage. That's all true, but don't give up on hypers. If you understand the contrast between them, you can understand them better. The most important thing is, hypercars can teach you skills GT3s will never learn you. I've been sim racing for years, have been obsessed with GT3, but after learning the last few months hypercars and the setup parameters, I actually got a lot better in GT3 too. Let's compare them. Let's get into it. In a GT3 car, you can kind of react. Something happens and you react. In a hypercar, you need to think ahead. You're forced to see multi-class traffic, you'll see a braking zone, you need to be early. The first thing you need to do when you switch to a hypercar coming from a GT3, every braking marker shifts with 50 meters. In a hypercar, you are forced to look at the situation ahead and plan what you're going to do. If there's multi-class traffic, you're already lifting in a hypercar. You don't have the luxury of reacting last moment, because then you'll start steering and braking simultaneously and you spin. Which brings us to the next point. In a GT3, you can slam the brakes and trail brake aggressively, turn the steering wheel, and if you kinda lose control, you can hit the brakes and remain control. In a hypercar, it's too late. You'll die a million deaths. The most important thing you need to understand in a hypercar is that you can only brake the car hard in a straight line, and you can only steer a lot when you're not using a lot of throttle or brake input. So there's more contrast between how much you do with your pedals and your steering simultaneously. When you come from GT3, this is really hard to unlearn for a bit. When you leave the pits in a GT3, you can immediately start pushing. Even with the cold tires, you just have to heat them up and start going. You don't have to think about a lot of things. In a hypercar, however, with cold tires, you kinda lock up like 10 times faster. You need to heat up your brakes and you need to empty the battery. So your first 2 laps are more preparation and warm-up. In a GT3, you can kind of like push immediately. Also, especially when you turn tire warmers on, GT3 is just like full send. Still, hypers need drainage of the battery and heating up the brakes. This is a skill you start learning in hypers because it learns you patience. And like in a GT3, you don't have to have patience. You just can go. Fly off. In a hypercar, you need to manage these energy systems. You need to drain battery, you need to make sure it gets enough deployment, or you need to like fill it up, because some hypers you need to enter the pits with a certain amount of energy, and if it's too low, you cannot start the car anymore and your race is over. And this kind of forces you to manage more things than just the driving. A little warning here, if you get used to this, like multitasking while you're racing and you go back to GT3, it kind of gets boring, especially on Le Mans with the long straights. If you take anything from this video, this is the most important thing. This is the speed contrast between them. Obviously, hypercars accelerate like way faster and they have a lot more downforce. But the real difference is in a GT3 car, in a slow state of cornering, you can kind of do a lot. You can maybe with the right TC settings hit the throttle, jump a curb, and as soon as speed starts to increase, you need to start being more careful, because all that weight of a GT3 car kind of needs like a precision on like fast bends, like really gentle trail braking or like touching the brakes. But in a hypercar, it's kind of the other way around. When you're in the slow speed state and you lose aerodynamics, you kind of need to be on your toes, and the rear is like super slippery. But when you get higher speeds and you're approaching high downforce corners, it can really feel confident, immortal even, with all that downforce giving you this like massive performance. But then when you brake again, all of a sudden all that strength and all that confidence starts to disappear because you lose that downforce. And this switch you need to make in your mind, especially when you come from GT3 or you go back to GT3, this is something you need to juggle with, and I think this is giving you a lot of skill because it lets you adapt. And if you don't adapt, you die. So as for a driving rhythm, you can really think about GT3s like attack, recover, repeat, wait, attack, recover, repeat, wait. That's a little bit how you can drive a GT3 car on like a novice or beginner level. In a hypercar, it's more about flow, sequence, precision. Not a lot of time to wait for the next corner section, especially in hypercars when you're doing pit stop strategy. In a GT3 car, you can use a long straight to figure out or change your MFD. In a hypercar, you just don't have a lot of time to do this. And for me, a main reason why I like hypercars so much compared to GT3, the VR environment, the speed sensation and the cockpits of hypercars are absolutely amazing. If you want to try VR, check the description. I have some cool discount codes for the Pimax headsets, and they also have like a big price drop on the Super headsets, which is a really good all-round VR headset. I also have some videos in the description if you want to learn more about VR. The area where I obsess over in the racing simulation is the car setup changes. In a GT3, the setup kind of helps you, and you can definitely tweak the cars to your liking, but you're more limited. So some cars have some sort of character you kind of cannot tune out at times, but in hypercars you can completely bend them around your driving style. I've been creating bunch of setups for hypercars these last few months, and the flavor and depth of the third element, for instance, is absolutely special. Which brings us to the default setups, which, in my opinion, are absolute trash. You can definitely make hypercars way safer than they are from the default. And if you don't want to mess around with this stuff, which is kind of complicated for most, I think that Porsche is one of the best cars to use the default setup. Or the Alpine is also kind of nice. Maybe some others. Please let me know in the comments which you think is the best default car at the moment. But if you want to use that Cadillac and you want a safe car, then check out the description. I have skill level setups, so level 1 super safe, level 5 super aggressive. Have a look. So let's talk about some confidence, because who doesn't want to get confident? In a GT3, confidence comes quickly, because confidence is built by being consistent. In a hypercar, confidence comes late. It needs to be built. And how do you build confidence in a hypercar? By doing it more. Yes, it's like kind of boring advice, but doing it more, but thinking ahead, like what I explained before, like take a more calm approach, get rid of that push mentality and start like completing good laps. And once you start completing better laps and better laps, you'll see the delta drop eventually. So when you're learning sim racing, I would definitely recommend to start out with GT3. It's just a way lower entry. You kind of get stuck easily, and the mastery of a GT3 actually goes really slow because you're not kind of forced into a better driving style, because you can get away with that crappy braking and steering all the time. In a hypercar, this comes way later. It comes after like lots of understanding. So there's like I see some people that are new to sim racing getting into hypers. I mean, that is just too hard and you probably quit. So start with GT3s, then transition into hypers if you really want to get better. Now let's talk about something super important, which is kind of the most important for me, is like the racing itself. The wheel-to-wheel racing in GT3s is a lot better. There's just more margin. Like other people, like if you make a small mistake, it's not that punishing. In hypercars, wheel-to-wheel racing is absolutely to another level. I still struggle with this myself because everything goes so freaking fast. Normally, the driving experience as of the pure driving, I like LMP and hypercars more, but for the real racing, wheel-to-wheel, close contact, I think GT3 is a lot better. When you make a mistake in a GT3, it's a small loss, it's kind of savable or recoverable, if that's even a word. in a hypercar, a mistake is costly, especially when you spin with 270, you hit the wall and you're dead. So the mistakes are being punished like 10 times harder in a hypercar. So in a GT3, when you hit the brakes, you can, in a long braking zone, you can definitely get 100% of this braking, and you can kind of release it. You can kind of like drop it quickly or trail brake properly. It's kind of getting the job done. In a hypercar, you have a very brief, sharp point of super hard braking with high downforce, but then as downforce drops, you kind of cannot use that full brake pressure anymore, and you kind of need to like being forced into a trail brake. If you don't do that, you kind of lose control. What really helps here is to drop the brake pedal force a little bit and increase the brake bias front value, and also a bit more brake migration gives a layer of security for this. And what about multi-class driving then in a GT3 or a hypercar? I think it's important to at least have known and felt a difference when you're in a hypercar or when you're in a GT3 car, because we both curse at each other and we're always right. You know, it's the GT3's fault, it's the hypercar's fault. But if you understand driving them both, when you're in a GT3, you know what a hypercar driver needs to deal with, and vice versa. And I think that is maybe something you kind of want to know as well, especially when you love the multi-class racing. Have both sides of the story, you know? Because it's very easy to make a mistake in a hyper, or feel like a safe dive bomb, which feels like a dangerous dive bomb to a GT3 driver. Now, most hypercars are super hard to drive because of aggressive default setups, and in this video we're gonna solve that problem with a build system for hypercars to make them safe, to understand a little bit of the third element. Trust me, you only have to do a few changes to make every hypercar a lot safer in Le Mans Ultimate. Over here. Just click it. Come on, man, click it! Thanks for watching.